Hi, I'm Mark Stoudemire, and welcome to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I can't wait for you guys to see what I have in store for you this season. 11 new comics, 11 new stories, unbelievable amount of just advice and just vulnerability about the lives of comedians and how that translates to the jokes that you love to hear on stage. Again, all the content this season will be completely free on my YouTube channel. I just ask that you do me just one small favor. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please rate and review me wherever you review your podcast. I truly appreciate that you guys do that for me. Again, you can also visit me at my website, markstod.com, where you can see all my upcoming show dates, along with any other content that I put out. Again, please leave a comment, like, subscribe to this channel. It means so much to me that you do that. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the joke.
I'm not very adventurous, so I try to have friends that do exciting things. A friend of mine went on safari to Africa, and while she was there, she saw a giraffe, and it was very close. It was like 50 yards away. So she took a step towards it, and it didn't run away. And she thought, this is great. I'm going to get to walk right up to a giraffe. So she's slowly creeping towards it, and it never runs away, but after a little while, it's still just as far away as it was at the beginning. And the reason is, a lot of wild animals, they're not stupid. They see you coming. So for every step towards them you take, they just calmly take one step away, so you never get any closer. Now, I've never been to Africa, but I have been to Home Depot. And I have seen in the distance, again, a long row of tools. What is that in the underbrush? A Home Depot employee. Never gotten close enough to ask one a question. Those guys, good at evading predators. The only time you can ask a Home Depot employee a question is if somebody else has already cornered them. You're like a hyena circling a lion's kill, trying to get little scraps of information. Where's the exit? This place is huge. I don't even want the trim anymore. I just want out. Do you even work here? I'm not so sure. I think some of those employees used to be like you years ago. And they just wandered around until they forgot what they were looking for, couldn't find a way out, and they're like, well, hand me an apron. Guess I'm part of the ecosystem now.
All right, welcome back to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I'm here with one of my favorite comics from Philadelphia, Doogie Horner, who is a writer, illustrator, and comedian. He's the author of the young adult novel This Might Hurt a Bit, the holiday classic A Die Hard Christmas, and many other books. His comedy album, A Delicate Man, was an AV Club staff pick. He won over a hostile New York City audience on America's Got Talent 11 years ago at this point, and is a frequent guest on Doug Loves Movies. Doogie, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Mark.
No, I appreciate it. Am I calling you from New York right now?
You're calling me from New York State.
New York
but
State,
not
okay.
New York City. We moved out when the pandemic hit.
Okay, good for you. How has the pandemic been going for you? Because I know since you're like a multi-talented artist, you know, both comic, not both, but like comic, graphic artist and writer, have you kind of like used the pandemic to like really bury yourself into more the writing artist side?
Yeah, I liked the pandemic. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because a lot of people died. They're like,
Yeah.
oh well, my mother didn't like it. But I mean, it was a time for me to just spend time with my family, and
Yeah.
we when the pandemic hit, we were living in Queens,
Okay.
and we left when they closed the schools. We were like, let's get out of here. I thought they were gonna we like thought they were gonna raise the bridges or something, like the Dark Knight. But so we went out to Massachusetts and stayed with family there, and it was like the woods. It was middle of nowhere. We had beavers and coyotes and leeches, and yeah, I used the time to write and draw comics, and I started drawing comics with my son,
Oh, nice.
and we had a lot of fun doing it. We really enjoyed it, and I started drawing a little comic book called Invisible Boy, and now
Oh,
that's
cool.
turned into my next book. It's going to be my next book. It's going to be 3 books.
That's awesome. And that's the
From
one you're doing with your son right now?
He and I aren't doing it together anymore. Kids that do
Okay.
this thing where like they'll get super into something for
Yes.
it could be a day, it could be a year, and then they're like the next day, all of a sudden they're like, I'm done. That's the old me. So like he and I made tons, like hundreds of pages of comic books, and
That's
then
awesome.
all of a sudden one day he's like, I'm done. So now I'm just doing it by myself. But yeah,
That'd
that's
be good,
the
though. How old's your
this,
son now? Because I think when I met you last time, he had just been born.
he just turned 6.
Yeah, okay. That makes
Yep.
sense. That makes sense. Well, cool. So I guess the way I mean, I've only met you once and our interactions were very brief. But the way I knew you and was really attracted to your style of comedy was um I heard about you being a Philly's Funniest Winner, which was amazing. And then you were on America's Got Talent.
Hmm.
And that whole I mean, you became almost like a folk legend with your audition. I mean,
Folk
and
legend.
I'm gonna link. I'm gonna link
Real
the
Woody Guthrie.
um kind of like the first question I'm going to ask you is because I always wanted to ask you this in case this interview gets cut short. How did you get on America's Got Talent? Was it the leverage from winning Philly's Funniest that kind of put you through to like maybe a shorter line, or did you actually do the whole process of like waiting in line and auditioning and going through that whole rigmarole? How did you actually physically get on the show?
So Helium said that anybody that wanted to audition could audition, and you could skip the line, sort of.
Yeah,
Like you didn't have to stand in. There's a huge line outside,
yeah.
and they're like, you could skip that one. there will be, there will still be many, many lines inside, but you could skip one of them. So Helium said, like any of the comics that worked at the club, um, would be able to skip that line.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'd never watched the show, um, but I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And so I went to I think it was at the convention center. I got to skip the long line, but then you go inside and it's like lines upon lines upon lines, and you like wait for a while. And then I went into a room with 3 producers, but you could tell they're just like interns,
Yeah,
and they've seen
yeah,
like 500 people.
yeah,
They're gonna see another 500. There's a camera there. They go, all right, do your thing. And
yeah.
I'm like, guys, oh, comedy, habba dabba doo, and they're just like, thank you very much for your time. And but then I went out into the hallway and they interview you, and I guess I was like weird. I could tell by the reaction from the camera person. They're like, this guy is weird. Comedy, TV likes weird people, like we need people we can laugh at. Um, so I think I did well in like that, and then they they called me afterwards, and I had to do a phone interview,
Oh,
and then
geez.
they emailed me like a questionnaire, with questions like, what challenges have you overcome to achieve your dreams? And I was like, uh, none, no challenge, lack of talent, asthma, uh, like I just that that the whole vibe of the show, like the inspiration thing
Yeah,
is not, most comedians are not that genuine and open, and like we're
yeah,
allergic
Closed off
to
group.
being genuine, you know what I mean? So I was like,
Yeah.
dream, fuck you, you know. But and then so they did tons of vetting and like they talked to you a lot, I think, just
Yeah.
to see what you're like, because what you're like really matters as much as your acts. I mean, you probably have more screen time on the show not doing your act than doing your
That's
act.
very true. I didn't realize that, but that's spot on. Yeah.
And then after all that rigmarole, then I went to New York
Yeah.
for the actual first televised audition, and that was at the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is big. And I got there, I don't know what time I got there at, maybe like 2, and I didn't go on till maybe like 10
Jeez
at
Louise.
night, 8. It was really late. I'd
Yeah.
been there like 10 hours. The audience had been there, I think, 5 hours. I
Yeah.
was the second to last act of the night.
Oh my gosh.
They almost told me, they're like, you might not get to go up. The dancing Sarah Palins are going kind of long. The dancing Sarah Palins were right before me. It was these old-timey, like 1920s style dancing girls, all dressed like Sarah Palin. And then there was a guy dressed as a bear, and they shot him. And I was going after that, and I was like, oh no. Oh no. I'm dead. I can't compete with the dancing Sarah Palins.
Did you? But anyway, so about the AGT. So I mean, the audition's legendary because you were not set up for success. Like these people had those boos in
No.
their holster. You could have came out with a Louis C.K. joke, and they would have still booed you right off the bat. What was going through did you know ahead of time that the audience was like, did you know that you were just going into the lion's den, or were you caught off guard by almost like the Springer like atmosphere where this audience was, the audience was now part of the show and they felt encouraged and entitled to be part of the show? Or were you somewhat heads up getting ready to, prepare yourself for this kind of rebuttal that you're legendary for?
I knew it was going to be extreme because I was underneath the stage, the green room for all the contestants. I don't know if you called it a green room. It was this big room where everybody was waiting. And it's funny because I got to see like everybody practicing their act. So you see magicians like appearing and disappearing doves, and people were walking on their hands and contorting, and I was just sitting silently like, I'm just gonna talk for 60 seconds, I guess. But we were underneath the stage, or where the audience was, so you could hear the roar of the crowd. It sounded like the ocean. You could hear like 2,000 people cheering or stamping their feet and stuff. So you could hear the show going on. You could hear like, oh, this is going to be intense. There's a lot of
it is like the Coliseum.
Loud people. It was like the Coliseum.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. It felt like a gladiator getting ready to go on stage. And I mean, in the audience's defense, I think they would have cheered if they had liked the jokes. I mean, I had a very negative opening to my act. I said, I think back then I opened my act, I said, are there any optimists in the audience? My jokes are going to disappoint you the most, which is like it's some self-deprecating humor. These people are like, I've waited here for 6 hours. I'm paid for parking. You're opening by telling me you're bad? Boo! They're mad. They're like legitimately, which totally makes sense. I mean, I don't, use that opener anymore. Now I open the show, I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I swear to God, it's going to be worth the babysitter. I'm trying my hardest. I promise you.
Did the producers tell you to use that joke first, or did someone else, like another Helium comic that was there with you for this, did they tell you this, or was this your own choice to go with that first joke?
That was my choice. You have to tell them what you tell the producers what you're gonna do for your act. And so in my case, it's just I tell them what jokes I'm gonna do. So I told them what my set list was gonna be. I typed it up and I sent it to them because they want to make sure you're not gonna say anything like messed up. And so I just did that, and they said, yeah, that's fine. I mean, to their credit, the America's Got Talent producers were very hands off. They pretty much let you do whatever you wanted to do. Like I was allowed to wear what I wanted to wear, say what I wanted to say. They're like, yeah, go ahead, dig your own grave. But they just have so many people on. They audition so many people, and they just let you do your own thing. And I think they figure some of these are going to be good, and it seemed it all happened very naturally. I mean,
so you didn't have any of that rebuttal prepared ahead of time, just in case, like just because you saw another comic go up and get one part. So that you were all shooting from the hip. as soon as that
Yeah.
crowd started. That's amazing. I understand, like, you have a back. I think I remember listening to an interview you had done saying, like, had I not been bullied as a kid, I probably wouldn't have gone into stand up. So
Yeah,
did this kind of like, it's kind of like strength and armor, like you really sharpened the sword, quote unquote, through your childhood, and now you're ready just to like fight back and hit the audience. And had you had a childhood free of bullying, do you think that your response would have been different had the crowd started to boo you?
I don't know. I mean, I've said before that I think, yeah, getting bullied made me able to do stand up because I got made fun of, and I learned, I saw how bad it could be. I was publicly embarrassed at school, and I kind of got used to it.
Yeah.
And I saw, oh, it's not the end of the world. Somebody makes fun of you.
Yeah.
If a stranger makes fun of you, like, of course that's demeaning and it doesn't feel good. But at the same time, like, bullies are a little bit different because it's almost like it's their job. That's what they do.
Yeah.
In the social order. I'm like, my job is to be weird, dress strange, and your job is to try to push me back in line.
Yeah.
And I actually learned to not respect bullies because the first time I started getting bullied in junior high because I had sideburns.
Yes.
I had big
Yeah.
long sideburns in like 7th grade. Nobody else could even grow them. Nobody else was wearing sideburns.
Yeah.
This was kind of around the time of 90210, but like my sideburns were like big beef, like Elvis chopped, like Motorhead. Made no sense. And so they were like, yo, Elvis. And I was like, oh, Elvis is the king of rock and roll. Thank you. No, we mean it as an insult. Shoot. But
yeah.
So one day a bully pulled me aside and he goes, hey, look, I like you.
Yeah.
Let me give you some advice. All you got to do is shave the sideburns off.
Yeah.
And we'll stop making fun of you. And I went, you will? And he said, yeah. And I immediately lost all respect for them because I thought they legitimately disliked me. But I was like, you're so shallow. I can get out of this?
Yeah.
Have you no integrity? You're supposed to hate me as a person.
Yeah.
But you just, I lost a lot of respect for them.
Well, that's very mature. I mean, and we're gonna touch on your childhood because a little bit, but it's like your childhood was, having realized that your book, This Might Hurt a Bit, is very autobiographical or memoirish. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the difference is, but with like
I don't know what the difference is
the peppering of fiction over top of it, so that you can kind of get away with it not being an autobiography. It's like your childhood was not very great. It was, I doubt if I gave you a magic wand to relive your childhood again, you would take me up on it. You're probably like, I'm okay. Let's just stay put here, kind of thing.
Nobody wants to relive their childhood, do they?
I'm doing something, you always hear like people like high school heroes and that kind of thing. Like, you hear those kind of people do it. I personally wouldn't do it. I had a very similar childhood in the bullying aspect, not so much in the home life, but
I liked high school. High school things got good again.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
But like when it comes to bullying and you realize a situation like that and you see like, did you mostly see like that the bullies were just insecure with themselves because here's a guy who's getting facial hair before him, so like more of a masculine kind of look. Then also like you're very intelligent, you skipped a grade, that's how you get the nickname Doogie. Like you think there was a lot of jealousy towards you, and this was a way for them to kind of, hey, they felt down here to you, and then they're gonna like, I'm gonna equal up and get one over. Did you ever look back and reflect on that a little bit that way?
Zero jealousy. No way. Zero jealousy. Nobody was like, this guy.
Well,
the kid listening to Louis Armstrong CDs. God, I wish I liked the Marx Brothers as much as he did.
Those are awesome. But I mean, like you mentioned the story, like you look back at one of your childhood bullies, and he's like this construction worker who lost his job like a million times. Like, and it brings you great, like it brings you like almost like validation, or I'm not sure, not vengeance. That's not the right word, but
vengeance.
Some kind of, but like something where it's like just like oh, okay, like there's more like an empathy towards this individual now, because it's like this explains a lot. Who knows what was going at home for this dude if this is like what his outcome is like. You ever reflect back and maybe like when you're talking to your own kid about bullying kind of give him like some insight that you weren't privy into at that age from your own parents?
You know, these days everybody's anti-bullying. Well, not everybody.
Yeah.
Republicans probably love it. They're like, yeah, more bullying.
Yeah,
But
they like
I
the
think
guy.
bullying's important. Like I learned it was good that it happened to me. It taught me empathy. I think I'm a nicer person because I got bullied. And I think there's always going to be bullies. Um, I think high school is a great time for bullies,
Mhm,
and also like
mhm,
jocks and bullies. High school is great. College is maybe still okay, but then like once you get out into the real world, these days the real world is made for nerds. Nerds rule
yeah,
because nobody wants a cool guy
yeah,
like a bully for a job. They're like, I want the nerd for the job. I want a guy who works hard,
yeah,
doesn't talk back, is intelligent, is,
yeah,
like all the qualities that make you nerdy,
mhm,
hardworking, obedient, creative,
mhm,
um, are the qualities you want in an employee for almost any job.
mhm,
And the qualities that make bullies, like being violent,
yeah,
uber confident,
yes,
even like coolness, is not
yes,
particularly useful in most jobs these days.
yeah,
So I feel bad for bullies because it's like you get out of high school and you don't have any useful skills. Um,
yeah,
I
very
feel like
true.
nerds are the new bullies. I feel like you couldn't make Revenge of the Nerds these days. You couldn't make that movie because people be like, "What?" You know,
Very true.
you have to flip it. You have to be like Revenge of the Job.
So you, because I think
I don't know what they didn't do. Couldn't come up with a scheme.
I have a quote here from you that I read. It mentions it's like nobody liked me in school. I was picked on a lot. I try to use humor to get people from pushing me around, but it didn't work. And so I feel like
That
there's like
made them more mad.
yeah, it's like,
I
well, I
tried to
feel like
use
I'm getting like a
humor and they
conflict.
just got mad. They're like, "Oh, Mr. Smart Guy, you got a smart mouth." I heard that a lot. You got a
Yeah.
smart mouth. I was like, is that
I'm very
good
sorry.
or that's bad? Ah, okay. Sorry.
Well, because I feel like your perspective now has changed from bullying because when I read this quote, and this quote had come out years ago, prior to, I think it came out right around the time your album was dropping. I think it was an interview it done for your album. So it's prior to your book coming out or your book coming out. But it's like, I feel like your perspective of bullying has changed because at least my interpretation of that quote was your childhood was miserable because bullies made it miserable. There was nothing fun about school. You couldn't be like you wanted to be who you were, but other people just hated you for it. But now there's more like an appreciation approach for those people who made your life miserable.
Hmm.
So have you had some kind of like a metamorphosis since maybe this quote came out and maybe just like with age or whatever you kind of
I still
acknowledge it?
stand by that quote. That quote's true.
Yeah,
Like it was bad, but
yeah,
like a lot of times bad experiences, you come out of them a better person. I came
mhm,
out of getting bullied with the ability to not care as much about people's opinions or to learn
yeah,
that like you can be publicly embarrassed, someone can hate you, but maybe don't pay attention to their opinion. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like if someone you have nothing in common with
mhm,
doesn't like you, that's
mhm,
not necessarily a bad thing. Like
mhm.
my son and I started rewatching the Star Wars prequels, episode 1 and episode 2, right? And I
Okay,
remember when they came out, I
yeah,
hated them.
yes.
And when
I
they
still
came out, I was like, how old were we? Like,
Oh, man, I was still in middle school, I guess, when it came
oh, I'm
out.
older than you then.
Yeah,
So, but I was not a
I'll
kid
be
anymore.
37. Yeah,
Oh, okay. So it was about that. Yeah, I was probably like in high school or something
yeah,
like that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and I didn't like them. I thought they sucked. My son is 6. He just watched episode 1. He loved it.
Mhm.
And I've read that George Lucas said that he made the prequels with kids in mind, with his grandkids in mind, right?
Yeah.
I hated the prequels. I hated Jar Jar Binks, but the prequels should not be listening to me. The prequels were not made for me. The prequels were made for kids, and kids watch it. My son loves Jar Jar Binks, right? So if some like bully, some
Yeah,
meathead
yeah,
makes fun of me, of course he doesn't like me. We have totally different things in common. So like being
yeah,
bullied taught me, I shouldn't you can't help but care what strangers think about you, but like you should try not to care what your stranger thinks about you. You should care what your wife thinks about you, or your
Yeah.
friend thinks about you, or your mom thinks about you,
Yeah.
people that know you and whose
Yeah.
opinion you value.
Yeah. That's
And it's
and that's a
also
very
important to be
mature thing.
kind.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, that's a very mature thing to say at our age. But how do you tell someone like your son when he comes home from school, like in, first, second grade, and there is a kid bullying him who doesn't have, 30 plus years of perspective to kind of reflect on? How do you kind of like let him know it's okay to be himself? Because I mean, I was bullied in school for always being small and skinny. So, and I would say like the opposite of you is my humor got me out of it. But with you, it seemed like the humor, even though
Got me
now,
in deeper.
it's like hilarious. I wonder if some of the people now who have heard your stuff have a different opinion, or maybe, I
They
think
would
your
still hate
humor
me.
is so
They'd be like,
smart that it didn't get it then. But going back to the original question, how do you relate to somebody with the theme of relation? When you use Star Wars analogy, like how do you tell like a kid who's 8 years or will be 8 or 9 that, hey, this all evens out later in life with just a short blip on this earth?
yeah, I guess I'd just tell them that. I'd say bullies have their place, I mean, I think it makes sense that bullies make fun of us. I mean, now that like Twitter is like we live more of our lives online, I feel like now nerds,
Mhm.
I feel like we bully the bullies more than the bullies bully us, because we live now in just like this mental space, this, just online and stuff. And like we're better writers.
Yeah.
We took typing classes, we could type faster, like
Yeah.
so I feel like if the bullies weren't bullying us, I feel like the nerds wouldn't bully as much. I feel like
Yeah.
we're a
You know
little
what it
more
feels like. Yeah.
chill, and we're just more chill.
Yeah.
We're more like, why would I bully someone? I'm reading a book,
Yeah. Probably the most
Um,
feared group right now is anonymous, and those people are just a bunch of nerds. Probably the
Yeah.
most feared group on this planet right now. They can shut down countries if they wanted to. Well, that's great. That's great.
but I
So,
guess I'll just tell my son, I'll be like, yeah, it might happen.
yeah,
You might get bullied, or you might become a bully. Like
yeah,
it's very appealing. I feel like everybody's done it a little bit. Like
yes,
I've seen nerds around smaller, nerdier nerds,
yeah,
and they bully, and you're like, oh, you
yeah,
get this rush. You're like, oh, I feel powerful now. I
yeah.
understand why people do it.
When you have kind of childhood the way you do, this is what the book touches on, and is like it seems now again, I don't know you well enough that we've never had a conversation beforehand. This is what this is all about, but the book makes it seem to me, and again, I understand like book was mostly autobiographical fiction, so correct me if I'm going down a path that's not correct. That your parents and home life were not supports. You couldn't go to them and be like, school is very hard right now. I don't feel like I don't know if you felt like you didn't want to go to school or whatever, but like, did you have that support system back home, or was it
Oh
just
yeah,
a very lonely kind of childhood?
I was lonely, but I was just like a lonely. That was just my temperament. I mean, my parents were great. I mean, my parents were very supportive. They were always kind. Um, I told them I was getting bullied,
Mhm.
but there's like not much they could do. Like, what are they gonna do? Like, go to school with me? Like they
Yeah.
tried to. If somebody hit me, they get in trouble.
Mhm.
Every time I get slammed or something, you go
Yeah.
to the principal's office. But like, um, I mean, no, my parents were very supportive, and they were great. I mean,
Okay.
me not going to school wasn't really an option. I wasn't gonna do that. I don't know.
Mhm.
You can't run from yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting bullied because I was a weirdo, and so I could have gone to another school, and there just would have been other people there that would have bullied me too.
Yeah.
So you can't.
Were you physically attacked as like from bullying? Was it more like a pick on, like just making fun of your appearance? But were you
I got,
actually physically
I
beat
got
on?
physically attacked, but barely. I mean, not bad.
Okay.
It was the suburbs. Nobody knifed me. Nothing too bad.
So the book is, having now, I'm trying, as soon as I booked you and for the interview, I've been trying to my best. The book is amazing. Like I haven't finished it yet, but I'm going to.
Thank you.
It's very addicting. It's very addicting, very relatable. Um, especially when it comes to the topic of grief and grieving and the fact that you did
Hmm.
lose an older sister to cancer. How old were you? I know the book has, I don't know, how old were you when your sister died of cancer? And how old was she in real life?
I was 10, she was 12.
12. And what was your relationship like with what was your, like, was she, were you guys really close, or what was that relationship like?
We weren't that close as far as I remember.
Yeah.
We weren't that close as far as I remember.
Is it
I
just
mean,
because
we
of
were
the age
close because
group,
she was
or?
my sister. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was just like a big kid, little kid thing. Like, you know, you don't want to hang out with your little brother.
Yeah.
So we actually weren't very close, and I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. I wanted to like spend a little more time with her and try to remember what you know, try to get some memories on paper before I forgot them all.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that's really, I like that. I like that attitude. And I like the fact that, yeah, there, it's the book is very like exploring this topic that you haven't really touched on in a lot of years, and really reflecting on it. Was there anything in your life that you had an outlet for at that time to talk about grief?
Yeah, my parents were really supportive. I mean, that's one thing. I feel like I had a yeah, it wasn't too. I mean, you know, somebody dies of cancer, that's sad,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's natural. It's like people die,
Mhm.
it's gonna happen, and my parents were supportive and kind and stuff. It's kind of like natural, as opposed to like, I think it would be way worse if like if one of your parents doesn't like you and
Mhm.
treats you crappy, like that's
Mhm.
unnatural, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that would be a much worse situation than just
Mhm.
somebody dies. Now it's unnatural for a young person to die, but it happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, she got sick twice. She was sick once when she was little, and
Mhm.
I was really little. I think maybe she was 5 and I was 3.
Mhm.
And then she got better, and she was better for 7 years, and then she got it again.
What
And
kind of
the
cancer did
second
she have?
leukemia.
Leukemia.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. Then, geez. So, but you're watching your older sister, and I mean, when you have leukemia, especially leukemia, she's in a lot of pain. And like, do you understand? Like, what did you understand at 10 years old? I mean, the way when you wrote this book in 2019, it makes me think that you didn't understand it, and that you used this book as an outlet to understand what exactly unfolded in your life during this period of time. I know the book is written in 2 days, but I understand the period of time is much larger. Like,
Yeah.
if you like, it seems like you understood it a couple years ago, but you didn't really understand it when you were 10. Is that true or not true?
I understood it. I wrote the book to help me process my feelings about it, because I think I had maybe repressed is too strong a word, but it's just
Mhm.
not pleasant stuff to think about.
Yeah.
And I wrote the book as a way for me to move on, to put
Yeah.
it to rest, to put the past
Yeah.
behind me.
But you mentioned in the book, it seems like the book gave me like really big like Stand By Me vibes, like that kind of
Oh, I like Stand By Me.
yeah. But like kind of like that older sibling who's kind of like, it sounds like the relationship was not as close, but again, you're 10 years, 10 and 12, give me two siblings opposite genders that are close at that age. But
Yeah.
um uh did you see that when this whole thing happened in the book? It seems like there was a wedge driven between your parents and you, but now you're saying your parents were fully supportive and were present with you during this thing.
They
So
were
was that
supportive.
good?
I don't know if there was a, it was sort of a, there was sort of a wedge. Um, but it like they were, it wasn't like their fault or anything, and they were
Mhm.
supportive.
Yeah.
Um, but I think when something like that happens, a lot of times it kind of, I don't know, you go into your own world a little bit, or it changes things.
Yeah.
But it's not like they weren't bad parents. They didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. Well,
It's
yeah, they're
just,
never in that situation before. It's like they're navigating new territory that no one wants to navigate ever, and you don't prepare to navigate. So
yeah.
um but like when I know parents that lose small children, like they, I see them. I don't know where your parent, but they either like obsess over the dead child, and and they kind of forget about the other siblings, or they obsess over the other siblings, like almost put them in bubble wrap so that nothing like that happens again, kind of thing. Did you feel like any one of like either A or B scenario there? Feel forgotten or just feel like over like helicopter parents then?
No,
Okay.
neither one. Yeah, it wasn't like Stand By Me where they left the dead kid's room exactly the way it was. I mean, they moved on. We moved. They're
Yeah,
like,
we to the country right after it
we
happened.
we just get out of this house.
Yeah.
Um,
Looking back, do you think that was the right move? Was to kind of like, okay, our life has changed. Let's physically change the environment around us then? Okay.
yeah, I mean, having a kid now, I know if my kid dies, I'll be like, I am moving to Japan. I'm
Yeah.
Japanese now. I'm embracing the way of the Bushido.
Yeah.
It's all changing.
Yeah.
You know, um,
So
yeah, I mean, if you can do that, I think it's actually probably helpful.
because my interpretation of what you just said in the last 10 minutes now is like this book had to happen because it's almost like your parents were like, okay, we're going to almost like eliminate everything about the sister by moving, and then we're just going to move on with our lives. Like, was there any discussion? Was there any memorializing, like on her birthday every year? Or almost pretend like when you grew up that she never even existed after she had died?
Oh no, it's not. It wasn't that dramatic. I mean,
Okay.
no. I mean, they still talked about her and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, the book is mostly true, but it's
Mhm.
also dramatized
Yeah.
somewhat to make it more booky.
Yeah.
No, I mean, they still talk about her. They have pictures of her.
Okay.
If I go to my parents' house right now, they have pictures of Melanie.
Yeah.
You can ask about her. You can talk about her.
Okay. Do they
Um,
do anything for leukemia? Like, do you guys run like some kind of, like a leukemia fundraiser in her memory or anything like that, just as a way to keep the memory of Melanie alive?
I do a comedy show every year. We do a big in memoriam screen point. All the lights go down. We do pictures of all the dead kids, and then I go on. I do stand up in the round. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. That's like the dog thing.
Oh, okay.
That'd be the worst to be the sad. No, we don't do
I
anything.
believed you. I was like, do you
We're like,
love
here's a bunch
to
of
put the
dead
pressure on?
kids, and now the jokes. Boom. No, I don't do anything.
Okay, because
I think everybody's already working hard to try to cure cancer.
yeah,
I think everybody's already on the same page.
the,
They're like,
the book.
cancer, bad.
So, did you feel that you helped? Do you feel that the book did help heal you?
Yeah, I got it out of my system, and I had no, that was like technically a YA novel.
Yeah.
I didn't really mean it to be that, but like they asked me, the publisher was like, all right, what's next? What's the next book? And I was like, there's no
Good
next.
thing. They're like,
Did nothing. That's it. I did it. I only have one dead sibling, so I don't need another book.
yeah.
But I had no interest in writing, and I only wanted to write that book because I wanted to explore that. And it was just nice also to like go back to my high school times and kind of remember
Yeah.
my old friends and remember my sister and that time in the country and process those emotions and stuff. But then after I wrote that, now I'm like, I don't have another book in that genre.
Yeah, but you mentioned that when your book had, the book was, I want to say Simon Schuster was going to set the publishing, and you called your parents, you're like, hey, I want you to read this because it's coming out.
Yeah.
And your dad goes, what are you doing? This is not something that goes on here. And
Yeah, he got mad.
and it was more along the lines of like, hey, what happens in the family stays in the family kind of deal should be
Yeah.
enough. But do you I know what happens later. I know how you got him to eventually get on board, but I'm gonna say like in that first initial when he says no, was that him? Why do you think like he couldn't recognize that this book was about you just trying to process this 20 some years later versus like, hey, this is a big money grab? Like that's not what like you like why what was the point? Do you think it resonated with him? Like this is for me and to help others that went through a situation like this versus this is not a cash grab kind of situation.
Well, he wouldn't know that it was for me to process it, or that I was writing it to try to help other people, because I would never say that. You know, like I'm not a very emotional person, and that's why I wrote the book, because I could be emotional in the book, but I wouldn't ever be emotional in real life like that. So I would never tell him that's the point of the book, because I'm like, I just wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So how would he know? And I don't feel like saying that, you know? So, but, so yeah, he was upset, and which totally made sense to me. And then, but he hadn't even read the book. He
Yes.
said he didn't want to read the book. And I said,
Why do you
well,
think that was, though? I can understand maybe not you not wanting other people to read the book. Why don't you think he wanted to? What do you think was the root cause of him not wanting to read your book, his son's book, about that takes place with his daughter? It's kind of like the starting out initial, you know, trajectory.
because I think I think he's been through all that shit. I think for me, obviously for me, my sister's death was way easier than it was for my parents. You know, like I'm not the one that needs that went through a really hard time. They went through a hard time.
Yeah, but
You know, like you
Yeah.
love your sister or your brother or whatever, but
Yeah.
you don't love them anywhere near as much as a parent loves their child. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I make it like I'm the main character of the book, but really I'm not the main character of that story. My parents are the main character of the story. They went,
Yeah.
It's way harder for a parent.
Yeah.
And so my dad was probably like, why the hell would I want
You
to
can swear.
go through that? You know, like, oh, I wrote the story about that time you got mauled by a dog and your pants fell down and everybody laughed at your little dick. And I wrote a book about it. You want to read it? But no, thanks. You know, like, so of course he didn't want to, you know what I mean? And so, but then I was like, well, can I just read some of it to you over the phone?
Oh,
And
that was
he's
sweet.
like,
Yeah.
fine. And so I read him, I just started at the beginning. And the beginning of the book is me and my dad hanging out together in the hangar. My dad used to fly airplanes. And it's just him and I hanging out, spending time together. And then he was okay with it. And he's like, all right, that's okay. You know, actually, I have an idea for a war novel set in World War II. So an American pilot and a Japanese pilot both get shot down and they end up on the same island. Do you think you could write that? And I said, that's Hell in the Pacific. That's the Lee Marvin Toshiro Mifune movie, Hell in the Pacific, later remade into Enemy Mine. You didn't come up with that story, Dad. He's like, no, this is different. I think it's different because it's a book. And you could write it. I would say it to you and you would write it down.
Well, you know, I thought about that story that you just described, and my initial thought was it's sweet because you do start out with this memory where you're spending time with your dad, and I thought, and it's like, oh, and it's just like, hey, I long for these times together, you know, that was happening prior to my sister dying, but then I hear another interview you talked about your father had a stroke and was disabled. Now, was that the cause of? I was thinking like, oh, is that why it's like, is it more sad now because it wasn't the fact that the sister died. It wasn't the fact that sister died. It was the fact that his father is just physically unable to fly planes now.
That was in the book too. That was part of it too. Yeah,
Okay.
the book was kind of also about that. Yeah, I miss flying with my dad, and he misses flying too.
Yeah.
So there was some of that in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. What's so? I mean, it sounds. I mean, are both your parents still around today?
They're still kicking.
That's good.
My dad will never die. He's had like 12 strokes.
Jeez.
He's in a massive motorcycle accident. He eats nothing but hot dogs and ice cream, and he will live forever. He is indestructible.
Yeah.
All his friends are dead. He's still alive. Half of them have died in plane crashes from flying ultralights. I mean, if he had kept flying, he might be dead by now. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I'm already a fear of flying. Please don't tell me. It seems like, and you might have touched on a little bit, but it seems like when you do comedy, your comedy is, you don't talk about yourself doing comedy. It seems like it's easier for you to write out in solitude in the setting of a book. Why don't you bring more? Now, I haven't seen you perform in a number of years, but so you may be doing it, but why don't you bring more of this vulnerable self to the stage? You do, I would say, like from what I remember about your album, and I was trying to listen to your album again. I have it on my iPod. My iPod wasn't working. I was like, oh crap. But I remember like your joke about the other Bethlehem. You do mention like this like there's hints of bullying that go on in that joke, but I would say your comedy is mostly Doogie Horner's observations about interactions that he's involved with, but you don't really touch on the personal side of yourself. So why don't you bring that more to the stage, this more vulnerable side with the sadness and the tragedy?
Yeah, I mean, most of my comedy is more just observational. Like right now, I have a joke about how I drive the speed limit. People don't like that. I have a joke about milk.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Every great comedian has to have a milk joke. I thought they'd all been written already. I was like, ooh, I got a milk joke. What else? I got a joke about bed bugs. Yeah, it's just like random observation stuff. I don't do too many personal jokes. And it's just because, I don't like talking about myself on stage, or that's also just not the kind of comedy I'm interested in. I just don't like talking about myself. And talking about like sad shit. I mean, a lot of comedians do that really well. Gary Goldman's, recent special was great.
Yeah.
But that's just not my personality. And it's also not why I do comedy. I do comedy to try to forget about that stuff.
Okay.
Comedy is like my break from reality. And so that's why I like to focus on, things that don't matter, or just little observations, talking about cheese or, whatever. I mean, or these days I talk a lot about my family. I think as soon as you have kids, you just become obsessed with your children.
So you're
bore the pants off everyone else. Talking about your kid,
not your folks or anything like that, or your sister or anything.
No, I just
nuclear family. Okay.
Yeah, I just have like a half hour of jokes about my son, just because,
Nice. Now,
you're a parent, proud parent.
So tell me how then you approach. Tell me the two ways that you approach a joke, and how you approach this book you just wrote. When you look at a joke and you're approaching a joke for the first time, like where does that come from? Do you sit down and kind of review your day, or do you take a note in your phone, then you look at that note and see, and then relay that to like, and show the converse side of that when you're writing a book with talking about deep subject matter like bullying and friendship. I mean, in the book, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's things going on with your friends that aren't the greatest in the world, and your relationship with your parents is not great, and the book doesn't seem as great, and your sister dying. Like, tell me the two approaches and how you took different paths to kind of complete projects, the book being a project and just a single joke being a project.
They're both, if you're doing them right, both of them are my favorite way to do both of them is as a habit.
Okay.
When I write a book, I write every day. I do 1,000 words, and I keep writing until the first draft is done. And I try to be as open as possible with the first draft, just put everything down. I try not to edit. I try not to have my editor hat on. I just put down what I want to put down. This is your big chance. Say whatever you want to say. And I keep moving forward. I never move back, or very little. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll start the day by editing the previous day's work a little bit. Like, I'll reread the previous day's work and just like maybe edit it a little bit, or chop things up or move things, but I try not to change it too much. And then I'll do that day's writing. And then when I finish the first drafts, I put it in a drawer for like a month or two. Then I bring it back out, read it, maybe take some notes in the margin or whatever, but try to just read it. And then I do the second draft, and I don't let anybody see the first draft. And then the second draft, after I write it the same way as I wrote the first draft. And then at the end of the second draft, again, I put it away for a month or two. Then I reread it, write down my thoughts on it, and then I let people read it, but only certain people. You want to make sure that the people you have read it are people that you think are going to be good readers that like
Give you good feedback.
yeah, not people that'll just tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, I meant like, I should say like
But
clickable feedback.
yeah,
Yeah.
you meant the right thing, but I just you want somebody that's gonna like that would read this book.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like how you don't want to show episode 1 to a 40-year-old. You want to show episode 1 to a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Um,
So who are these
so,
people? Who is your litmus test for the second draft?
my readers right now are my friend Jason,
Mhm.
who I used to work with at Quirk. He's an editor and he's an author. My wife, and then I think that's it. They're my 2 main readers.
Mhm.
And then depending on the book, I'll maybe show it to some other people that I think like, oh, they might read this kind of book or whatever. They're my 2 main readers. Oh, and then my editor and my agent.
Yeah.
My agent. And so I guess those are my 3 main readers. And then this might hurt a bit, changed a lot. The first draft was way more violent. It was way more about the bullies. It was way weirder and more experimental. It had all these dream sequences with Jason Statham in them. There was a scene where we were crabbing together.
Okay.
We were under a bridge on a pylon and we were catching crabs with chicken necks tied to shoelaces. We'd taken our shoelaces off, and it was just like a lot of crazy shit, you know.
Yeah.
And and it was originally called Horse Dogs. It was called Horse Dogs forever. And the first thing Simon and Schuster said when they bought it was like, well, we're definitely changing that name. Oh, come on, Horse Dogs. I'm still mad about that. I should have kept it Horse Dogs. But
I do like this title though. This might hurt a bit. It's a good title.
Yeah.
I
wrote. They're like, well, we can't have it be that, and so I was like, well, if it's not that, I kind of don't know. So I wrote a list of over 100 titles, and I said, pick one. I don't care. Cry Hard was one that I thought was ingenious.
Die Hard theme.
There's a
Die
lot of
Hard theme resonates for your whole life, man.
Yeah, dude.
With you and action heroes, you love Bruce Willis, you love Jason Statham. You're a big action guy.
Big action guy, yeah.
Is that who you wish you were be? Like this whole Doogie that was wearing the weird clothes and being bullied. Did you always have dreams to be the Jason Statham, Bruce Willis of your life? No,
I wasn't. Okay. I wasn't into action movies at that age. At that age, I was into like jazz.
Okay.
The Marx Brothers, like old comedy.
Marx Brothers. Yes.
Jazz, just the dorkiest shit.
Hope,
yeah. Loved Bob Hope, Son of Paleface, Danny Kaye. Yeah. Just the worst, nerdiest, dorkiest
Legend,
Dick Van Dyke fan, you know.
Legend.
No, they're legends, but you know, it's not cool. So that's how I write a book. Mm-hmm. And when you're writing a book, it's almost like the opposite of comedy, where you have to be very genuine and be very open and like pretend you're this person. What would this person do? And you have to think about structure, and at a certain point you do have to think about structure and theme, unfortunately, and language. And when I write a joke, it's a little bit different. Like I just kind of always try to think, oh, is that funny? Is that funny? And if I think of something funny, I go, all right, remember that, that's funny. And then I'll either write it down in my notebook, or I'll type it in my phone, or I'll do a audio recording in my phone, or I'll type it on my computer. And then I just let it sit there. And I'll keep thinking about it. And then maybe I'll go in and write some more, I'll type some more. And then I feel like generally the good ideas stick around or kind of float to the top. So if an idea sticks around long enough, then I go, okay, how can I make this better? And I just try to think about it, or I'll write, or I'll type, or I'll think, and I'll say it. And then I have a friend that I run jokes past. We do it every other week.
Who's this?
Joe Zimmerman.
Joe Zimmerman. Okay.
He and I do it. I've done this with other people, and it's hard. You gotta, again, like with the writing, you have to find the right person, someone that's on your wavelength and
you can feel safe with.
not that you feel safe with, but that like is going to give you useful feedback,
Yeah.
you know. And it's really useful for getting premises off the ground,
Mhm.
because once you write something as a joke, you can slip that into your acts in between other jokes that you know work.
Yeah.
And even if the joke doesn't work,
Hmm.
the audience is just like, oh, okay, that joke didn't work. But there's sometimes where you have a premise and it's not written as a joke yet. And you're like, is this premise even funny? And so doing it, writing with a friend is really useful way to get premises off the ground, because you can't slip a premise in the middle of your act. You can't tell
Yeah.
a bunch of jokes and then go all of a sudden, hey, box springs are weird, right?
Yeah.
It's like a hard mattress under the soft mattress, and like our parents all had them, but we don't have them. We stopped and nothing bad happened, and it was like we didn't. Oh, so we didn't need the hard mattress the whole time. Like it's hard to slip that in because it's got just a totally different tone and rhythm. You know,
Yeah.
is that anything? Can I? Um, so I use that biweekly writing session as a good way also to test stuff out to see if that
Yeah.
is even a good premise.
I like it. Now it's funny because you're this brilliant author, but I wouldn't classify you as a storytelling comic.
I'm not a storytelling comic,
Yeah,
no.
you're more observational, and you know, you described when you first started out, you were like a one-liner guy, and then that
Yep.
kind of whole thing evolved. And you mentioned one time you were like, I'm too alt for the main clubs, but I'm not alt enough for the alt clubs. And then you go on to win Philly's Funniest, which is I want to ask you about this specifically because Philly's Funniest, although I always admire people that win him because they have to be the funniest person. There's a huge bunch of talent. There's also a lot of popularity involved. So how did you feel being this person who wouldn't consider yourself popular in school, winning a hybrid popularity talent contest? And then how did you win it being the kind of like this demographic of comic that didn't really fit in anywhere? Kind of give me that whole experience that you had winning that contest.
Think I won it because yeah, I just did an act, and my act at that point actually was a little bit more personal. I
Okay.
had a joke where I was on Last Comic Standing, and on Last Comic Standing they said, we don't like this weird character you're pretending to be. And I wasn't pretending to be a weird character. I was just
Yeah.
being myself. And they're like, this has to be no real person. Nobody would act like this, you know? And so I told a joke about that. And then I think I told a joke maybe about my eyebrows or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
you know, like, and then I forget what the other ones were, but it was my set was like a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
And so I did fit in pretty well at Helium. Helium Comedy Club was a really great place to start
Yeah.
because I was considered alternative. I was considered weird compared to the other comedians, but the audience was okay with it,
Hmm.
or like they thought it was weird, but it was just the right amount of
Yeah.
pushback that like I kind of liked it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but I was never alternative in the sense at that time there was a lot of anti-comedy going around also, like
What is,
comedians.
I guess, like, what is anti-comedy? I hear this, but I really don't know what that means. Like, what that,
You're
like
intentionally
puppets?
trying to be not funny.
Oh, okay. Oh, kind of
So
the Andy Kindler kind of way of doing comedy.
yeah, although I don't know if he's more like he's his whole other thing.
Yeah.
I mean that is anti-comedy, but like I feel like Andy Kindler as a genre is Andy Kindler. Andy
Yes.
Kindler, it's like tell a joke, a
Oh,
like 30-second joke,
yeah.
then that you know is not good, that you know is bad, and then spend 3 minutes
Yep.
talking about why that joke was bad, then spend another minute talking about how the audience doesn't like you,
Yeah.
then tell another bad joke that you totally don't believe in, you don't stand behind at all,
Yeah.
then dissect that.
Yeah. I know.
Um,
Okay, anti-comedy, and I kid that his name is right here. I'm not consider
oh,
that
Andy
anti-comedy.
Kaufman.
Andy Kaufman. Yeah, I never got
Yeah.
him. I never was a fan, but I guess he would be anti-comedy, right?
Yeah, or
Okay.
Steve Martin, his act was sort of anti-comedy, but it was
Okay.
above that because he had this whole level of showmanship also.
Yeah.
It was like anti-comedy comedy though.
Yeah.
It was comedy. But at that time there was a lot of like hipster comedy, um, which I think is still out there a little bit, although now it's morphed and become more absurd and I don't know, but anyways,
Yeah.
But my comedy is like pretty basically mainstream, especially now. I feel like I haven't gotten more mainstream, but people's taste has gotten more alternative. So now I seem like even more mainstream.
Yeah.
Like my act is basically clean, and I'm just talking about like the speed limits and
Milk.
bagels and milk and whatever,
Yeah.
ice cream, whatever. Just but
Yeah.
it's still like I think a little absurd, and I like weird comedy.
I think your comedy is just brilliant, and I think, yeah, you're right. I think, like, if you had to categorize comedy, you would throw yourself into the category with Jerry Seinfeld, but I wouldn't say anyone can do the comedy you can do. There's a certain the way you deliver the joke, the way it's told. I mean, the one I didn't have it on video, so I didn't want to use it, but the one I really loved is the dollar pizza joke that you did on your album. That one is my
Oh
favorite.
yeah.
Just you're talking, just the fact that, like, dollar pizza is so out there. Everyone has seen dollar pizza, but you're able to connect the dots to be like, hey, like, oh, like, you got to try this, like, things that are just unattainable to you, and just really funny. I know other comic I know has your style of comedy, even though I would wedge it in with like that Seinfeld observational he made me. When you're writing jokes like these, and you're writing jokes like the cheese joke and the safari joke.
I have a friend who does not like cheese. And when people find out he doesn't like cheese, they get furious. They get so angry. They act like they're cheese. But it's interesting because they don't get angry at first. At first, they feel sorry for him because they think, oh my God, this poor guy thinks he doesn't like cheese. Must have been in a car accident or something. I gotta help him out. So it happens the same way every single time. The first thing they do is they start listing different cheeses. They go, what about cheddar cheese? Have you tried cheddar cheese? What about Gouda? Oh, what about Swiss cheese? It's like when you tell people you don't like the Beatles, so they start angrily running through the discography. What about the White Album? What about Abbey Road? They'll go on as long as they have to. And so finally they're like, oh, you never listened to the unreleased BBC bootleg sessions? The Beatles cut in '62? Well, I guess you never really listened to the Beatles then, did you? What about Manchego? What about Pecorino? What about goat cheese? And he says, those are all types of cheese, a thing I do not like. And they say, okay, that's fine. That is fair enough. It's your opinion, so it is. It's okay. Do you like mozzarella sticks? Trying to trick him like a detective questioning a crafty criminal. Where were you last night? I was at home. Okay, where were you last night? I was murdering somebody. Aha! What about grilled cheese? What about chicken cordon bleu? What about fondue? And he says, those all have cheese in them, and I don't like cheese, so I don't like those things. And then they say, but you like pizza. They don't even ask, they're just confused. They're like, you like pizza, and pizza has cheese on it, so you like cheese. And then he says, I don't like pizza. And that's when they finally realize, this son of a bitch doesn't like cheese! And the engagement's off, he has to leave town, jump out of a hotel window with a suitcase full of soy milk or whatever the fuck.
What is it? I know where the big punch is in each of those jokes, but is that what you first wrote down, or did you kind of Oregon Trail your way there eventually from like a funny premise? How your jokes start out initially on paper?
I must always start out with the premise.
Okay.
For me, the cheese joke, the premise was when you tell people you don't like cheese, they think you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're wrong. how would you
Yeah.
know what you like is
Yeah.
basically what they're saying. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
They're just like, this guy just hasn't had the right cheese. He's just been eating American cheese his whole life. And then they're like, oh my, I'm gonna save this guy. I'm gonna change his life by introducing him to
Yeah.
manchego. You know,
Yeah.
he's like, no, I know about manchego. It's a cheese,
Yeah.
a thing I don't like. Like, no, 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 no. You just
Yeah.
never had mozzarella. I've had
Yeah.
mozzarella. You know, and then they go, what about pizza? Pizza
That's the
has cheese
punch.
on it,
Yeah.
and you like pizza, so you do like cheese. And then he
Yeah.
says, I don't like pizza. And then they go, oh, I see. You're an asshole. Then they're mad at you. Like, this guy knows. I thought this guy didn't know what he was talking about. He knows exactly what he's doing. He has chosen this path for himself. He's a piece of shit is what he is. He's a bigot. He's lactose intolerant. I'm not intolerant.
It's
Can't
amazing. I got my
process
little comments.
lactase.
But I was even saying like the safari is even better joke because the punchline is so great in that where it's the long it's one of those things where like the setup is so long but the payoff is so worth it. Like I almost wouldn't even recommend that style of joke to somebody unless they're at the level of intelligence and humor that you're at. Because you do this whole set about safari and here you just kind of like run from one rooftop to the other and get to Home Depot and the audience makes the leap with you. And it's so unlike, I mean, it's an analogy, but it's like the two most separate things in the world, but just makes sense. Did you think of that analogy when you first started getting the seat of that, or did you just work and work and work and work and then bam, that just connects one time at an open mic somewhere?
It just happened. I was reading about, I think I was reading about safaris and about how animals behave on safari and
Yeah.
how, yeah, they see you like you're on the savannah, so they see you. They have better eyes than we do. They see you coming,
Yeah.
and they're like, "I'll just stay far away.
Yeah.
However close you get, I'll just keep
Yeah.
going this way."
Yeah.
And I was at Home Depot, and I
Yeah.
realized, oh, the people that work there do the same thing.
Yeah.
They see you in their peripheral vision, and the aisles are so long
Yeah.
they can just keep moseying, and it's like you got to chase these people
Yeah.
to catch them.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's excellent because everyone's had that experience. It's not like just the Home Depot near where you live, that has it. Everyone was on board. That's the punch is so big. So how if you can remember that far back to when that joke started to kind of take shape and form, did you know that you wanted to? So you read the article first, and then did you read the article and then want to write a joke about it, or did you read the article and just kind of sat in the back of your head until you went to Home Depot? And then you were like, aha, joke. Is that kind of what
yeah,
happened?
yeah.
Okay.
The safari thing just stuck in the back of my head. I just remembered it because I thought, oh, that's interesting, and also because I remembered from our days of cow painting that the cows would do the
Yeah.
same thing.
Okay.
And they would see, the cows would see you. They
Yeah.
never ran away from us, but we never got any closer to them. And I was like, how are they doing this? Like, they just go the same speed you go in the
Yeah.
opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so when I read about that, the animals on the savannah, I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's the same as cows. And so it
Yeah.
was just something I remembered because I thought it was interesting. And then I've been to Home Depot a lot, and I always found it so frustrating.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's certain subjects that you just think are interesting. You're like, I
Yeah.
want to write about Home Depot, or I want to write
Yeah.
about box springs. Like, I have a
Yeah.
joke I've been wanting to write for
Yeah.
years about abstract art, about how
Yeah.
when people look at it, their huge criticism is, my kid could do that.
Yeah.
But you're insulting your kid. Like, you're not just making fun of Picasso, you're also
Yeah.
slamming your 5-year-old. And is that really necessary? Couldn't you just say, I don't like it?
Yeah.
You have to also be like, I don't like it, and my kid also stinks at art. They're worse. This is bad, and they could do it, and they're horrible. So, so I've been like, but
Jeez,
I've
that's brilliant.
I've told it on stage, and it's just always like done like, okay, like there's certain
Yeah.
premises, there's subjects you want to write about that I've tried over the years, and they always just do like, okay. And so I put them back into my
Yeah.
notebook, but then someday you hear some other thing, like that fact about animals on safari, how they
Yeah.
evade how they evade you, and then you realize, oh, I could use that.
Yeah.
So it's great. Like, I mean, every comedian, you write 10 jokes and only one of them ends
Yeah.
up being good, but those other 9, you can remember them or keep them in your notebook, and then someday you hear some other thing, or you realize, oh, that's how I can improve it, or that's how I can make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. Even though, so I guess, even when you said like, hey, when you're writing a book, you never go back, always go forward. But that's somewhere
Let's
where
go
you would
forward.
differ in comedy. Like sometimes I'll go back, if it makes sense in
Yeah, I'll
comedy.
go back all the time
Yeah.
because if you were, I mean, a lot about comedy is just like, to
Yeah.
justify a joke, the only justification you need is, well, I'm interested in it. And
Yeah.
so if you cared enough to write it down or think about it in the first place, you were interested in it. Now, it might not be relatable to anybody, it might not be strong, but I think just the fact that you were interested in it means that it's worth keeping around to think
Yeah.
to think of. And just, I mean, a lot of times how you make jokes is just by making connections. This is like that. You
Yeah.
combine these two different things.
Yeah.
And so the more kind of premises you have floating around in your mind, the more likely you are to make an unexpected connection.
I like that. I like that. So you're constantly, as you kind of exist in life and live your life, kind of like what Jerry Seinfeld one time said in an interview. He's like, I'm never really present. I'm always thinking of jokes. Would you relate to that? Like, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm at the store with groceries or working on my new novel or playing ball with my kid, that premise is always just pinging off my head kind of thing. And
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I used to like that, and then because it gives you something to do. Because most of the
yeah,
time you're doing something and it's not that hard. You could be
yeah,
doing something else, and so I always liked that with comedy I could have another thing going on where I was thinking about jokes. Although a couple years ago, I finally started to get tired of it. I was like, okay, this is enough. And so when the pandemic hit,
yeah,
it was actually nice. That's why I said at the beginning of it was a nice break, because I was like, oh, I can't do comedy.
yeah,
So I don't, there's no point. I have no interest in writing jokes if I'm not going to be performing. I only write when I perform, because
yeah,
otherwise it's annoying. You write a great bit,
yeah,
but you don't know if it's a great bit or not because you can't
yeah,
try it out. So it's like,
yeah.
what's the
Then you have
point of this?
anxiety because he's let tell it and just sitting on this thing. Yeah,
So when the pandemic hit, I stopped writing. So I didn't write for a year and a half.
yeah.
And it was actually a nice break because it did free my mind up to think about other things. And
Nice.
I found that refreshing.
Good. Well, I'm glad you had a good pandemic. Good.
Oh, it was great. I loved it. I hope it keeps going. I hope we get another bigger one.
But so going back to that safari joke, and when you did it work right away when you made that connection Home Depot, or did you have to really tinker with it? And if so, how did you tinker with it so that the whole audience understood, hey, this minute setup about safari makes sense to this interaction that we all go through at Home Depot? Instant connection, or did you really work hard on that?
That joke, that joke worked right away. There's some
Yeah,
jokes that when I write them, they work. Most of my jokes, either like I write them and they
yeah,
work,
yeah,
or I write them and they don't work, because I tend to write them pretty carefully, pretty tightly. I'm not a super loose, riffy kind of comic. But there are some jokes that, I mean, a lot of times what'll happen is I'll write it and it maybe doesn't work at the beginning because I've got too many words in it. And the timing is off.
yeah.
I think my biggest weakness is rhythm, and
Okay,
and kind of having
interesting.
a lot of times my jokes ends the wrong way with like the wrong kind of rhythm, where the audience goes, oh, is it over? Oh, okay. So now it's the next. Okay.
Really, yeah,
Should
it's
we
funny.
laugh?
I was gonna say, I'm sorry. I was gonna say it's funny you say that because I think your rhythm, at least from the jokes I've heard, are really on point. I think about all your jokes are kind of like a chainsaw. Like you start out real docile, and then you get more ramped up. And you even kind of did it now when you're doing the cheese joke. You kind of get this voice, and you almost turn like into this character. You're your pitch gets higher, you get more animated, like it's like chugging along. So I feel like your rhythm is very good. It's almost sing-songy, kind of how your delivery kind of goes as the joke progresses. It's very, very, docile and static, and then it's like then and we can see you coming like more at like when you're like the cheese joke's a great example. Your joke about the police sketch artist joke is a great example where you're just like your tone is just ding, 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 gets more elevated, and then like it reset. We know you're the next joke because then you reset back down to this, kind of how you are right now, talking to you kind of person. Is that deliberate, or is that just how you are? If you're talking to your wife and you see something absurd, you just want to go vent to her.
That's just how I am. I just get worked up. I just start out slow and then I get more worked up.
I mean,
But I mean, like, that's like a crescendo. I feel like people that have good rhythm, look at Nate Bargatze or look at Todd Barry.
Yeah.
They seem like they're talking slow.
Yeah.
But they're actually talking fast in a way. And they have this really good steady. I feel like my rhythm's not steady. I feel like I wish I had like a metronome, or Joe does it too, Joe Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Nate Bargatze, they have this, they seem like they're talking slow.
Yeah.
But they're actually talking fast.
Yeah.
And you can kind of, I don't know, like where you are in the joke. And when the end comes. And I feel like with me, like, yeah, I get excited and I start yelling and shit. But then at the end, you're like, oh, is he done? Okay. He really has some strong opinions about sea salt, So I wish, I'm trying to actually slow myself down and think more about the rhythm of the joke than I do, because I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking of the fact that, like, you're talking about you struggle with the amount of words, and I can see, because when you're a writer, you really want to do a great job of like setting the scene with a lot of visual language and tone and kind of like bringing us into the time period in which you're trying to do. But with stand-up, especially your jokes, which are generally like shorter, you're really just like bam, it's not one liner, but it's like the next one up from that. It's like,
they're like medium.
So how do you go about kind of setting aside your writer brain from your stand-up brain and edit your jokes? Is there something that you do? Like, is that just
it happens naturally? It happens naturally. It's when you talk, when you say something, your thoughts go through this filter naturally that makes you edit out certain words or shorten it, or it's just something that happens naturally from talking. Like I'll write jokes down in my notebook, or I'll write them on my computer. But it's mostly just so I don't forget them. And then when I say them out loud, those are the words. And I only go back to writing if I have to. Sometimes I'll have a joke that's working, but not quite perfectly, or like some parts are working, but other parts aren't. And then I'll go back and write it down again the way I've been saying it, because then sometimes you can see the problem, because sometimes when you're saying it, it's hard to view it objectively because you're saying it. Do you know what I mean? Head. You're in your own head, or so sometimes I'll go back and write it down again the way I've been saying it.
Are you disciplined in your joke writing like you are in your book writing? That doesn't sound intelligent way of saying that, but like you mentioned the habit part of writing your books, and then I remember in an interview you said, I'm hard on the process, but I'm easy on the writing part of it. Like I give myself more leniency when it comes to the writing. Do you do the same for stand-up? Do you have a habit with stand-up, and is it more like when it just comes and goes, because you're not really writing it out as much as it needs to be, kind of thing?
I don't have a rigorous habit for stand-up, because I should. I mean, every stand-up should, but I don't, because I don't have to. Like when you write a book, I kind of have to be rigorous about it, partially because a book's longer, it's bigger, it's longer, and it's one thing. And so you have to do something to make sure that you don't stop. and you have to do something to make sure that it all hangs together.
Okay.
And with stand-up though, you kind of can not have a schedule, and stuff just will sort of pop into your head, and you go, oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. And if you
Yeah.
just sort of like naturally do that, you kind of just like generally end up with
Yeah.
a certain amount of jokes, you know. And
Yeah.
then also nobody might, you know, if I tell old jokes, as long as I have a certain amount of new material,
Yeah.
you know, you can go and tell old jokes and nobody gives a shit. And if I don't release a new album, if it takes me 7 years instead of 6 years, nobody cares, you know.
Yeah.
But like with book writing, I kind
You
of have to be
deadlines.
on more
Yeah.
of a schedule, because, you know, my agent's like, where's the book? Or your editor's like, hey, this is due. This was due today, you know.
Yeah.
But nobody calls up and is like, where's the new joke? The joke was due. We have to send it. We have to send it to copy editing. What are you doing? You know. So I feel like it's kind of easy to be
Yeah.
lazy with joke writing, but
Are
it
you
probably shouldn't be.
are you thinking about a new album or anything, like a new thing you would release to the public, whether it's via YouTube or anything for stand up?
Yeah, so I recently realized when I started doing stand up again in December.
Okay.
I was like, pandemic's over. It was not over. I was like, it's over, and it's fine, it's over. And so I went and looked and at like my act,
Yeah.
and how much I had that wasn't on the previous album, and I realized, oh, I have enough for a new album. So I tested it out in Philly a couple months ago, and it was just barely 45 minutes of
Okay.
like new stuff.
Okay.
So I'm gonna keep working on it and do like try to get like another 10 minutes,
Okay.
and then polish it over the summer, and then I think I'm gonna record a new album in Philly either late summer or early fall, maybe
Oh, nice.
September or something like
Well, let me know. I'll be there. Are you at Helium again?
that. At Helium again, yep.
Okay. Which reminds me, we took a huge big tangent, but going back to this Philly funny thing, because I love Philly's funny story. What it, I was like Helium, Philly's funniest. What did it feel like to win that? Like, did you feel like you were going to win it when you initially did your finals?
I felt good about it. I mean, I feel like every comedian, every year when you do Philly's Funniest, you're like, I'm gonna win. I mean, that's kind of part of it being a comedian, is you need to
Yeah.
have the delusion. You're like, this is
Yeah.
gold. I'm the
Yeah.
best, because otherwise you can't deliver your material with conviction.
Yeah.
So I feel like everybody's like, I'm gonna win this year, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if that was my third year doing it, my second or third year. The year before I had lost, I can't remember if I placed or if I just lost. I can't remember, but I was all bummed out, and I walked home and I said to myself, I'm going to stop at every bar on the way home. Bar. And I got like, and I was wearing my suit, and I was
Yeah.
like walking through, I had to walk to Fishtown,
Yeah.
you know, and I was like in these Fishtown bars, you know.
Yeah.
This was before Fishtown was gentrified, and I was, you know, drinking in a Brooks Brothers suit, you know, like the Happy Tap, and people were like, who the fuck is this? This sad guy is crying, you know.
Yeah.
So that year I felt pretty good. I think I assumed I was going to win that year.
Okay.
Because my act was good. I was feeling good. I think I assumed I was going to win that year, but I was really happy. I mean, obviously winning Philly's Funniest is not like a big deal to anybody except the people who live in Philadelphia, you know.
I think it's a big deal. Yeah.
But like I loved Philly's Funniest. The way they used to do it was at Helium Comedy Club, they would pack the whole competition into 2 weeks,
Okay.
I think. And every night there was another show. And so it was great because every night you could go. And so you start with the prelims.
Yeah.
And the prelims, anybody can be in the prelims. All you have to do is pay $12. And so it would just be insane people that couldn't get on the open mic, that weren't good enough to get on the open mic, would be at the competition because they let everybody in.
Yeah.
And so you'd see these.
Everybody's money is good here.
What's that?
Everybody's money is good here.
Yeah. So you'd see like crazy people that were horrible, but they're like, I know I can get up.
Yeah.
And so it was like these fascinating train wrecks. And then you get to the semifinals, where the comedians were, or the quarterfinals, and
Yeah.
the comedians would get better and better. And so you would go every night, and some nights they'd have 2 shows back to back. And
Yeah.
so you'd go with all your friends and you'd watch all the different rounds, and it was great. It was like exciting.
Yeah.
And now they spread it out over the whole summer.
Yeah.
Um,
There's so many people now. Yeah.
because there's so many people.
Yeah.
And I think also because like before they were doing Philly's Funniest, and they would do it, you'd lose 2 weekends.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you could have headliners, like real acts on those weekends instead of
Yeah.
doing Philly's Funniest. And
Yeah.
so and there's more people and stuff. So anyways, I always really loved,
Yeah.
just going and watching Philly's Funniest. It
Yeah.
was fun.
Because you're now a father and a husband, and you're a good father. From what I can understand, like with you, it's like I can understand like spending time with your kids very important to you. Is it really that, or is there a floor to what you will accept when you go out and do a show, and what is that? Especially if you had to travel.
Oh, if I have to, it depends. Yeah, if I have to like drive a long way and I'm not getting paid.
Yeah, drive to Philly.
you-
Let's say you've been invited to Philly, not a Helium show, but just drove to Philly to do it, like the Norristown show, for instance. If they asked you to do that again, you have a floor now, or just still any show goes at this point?
Well, like when I say any show, it's pretty much any show. Like if it's really far away and it's not
Yeah.
a lot of money and
Yeah.
it's gonna suck, I guess I would probably say no.
What's the right amount of money to get you to do something like headline a show in the burbs of Philadelphia?
I don't know. It depends. It depends how much time I'm doing. It depends how many
Okay.
people are at the show.
Okay.
I don't
I
know.
asked this because it's interesting because comedy is just there's no union, there's no
No.
that you don't there's a big secrecy around unless someone volunteers how much money they've made from the weekend before you at a venue. It's very not hush hush or whatever. So it is interesting. So but
I just
thanks for
take what people give me, and usually they give me enough. I'm like, how
that.
much is it? All right, that's fine.
Good.
That's enough. Fine.
Before we get into compilation questions, I do want to say, it's amazing. You're still a young guy, and
Thank you.
you have such a huge body of work. You've created a lot of quality. It's not I mean, Simon Schuster is a huge publishing company. I mean, they just did Howard Stern's book last year, so it's like you're not independently releasing stuff yourself too. It's like your people want this from you. You have a great album, Delicate Man. I own it. It's amazing. You have great bodies of work, with the This Might Hurt a Bit, and the everything explained through flowcharts, which I when you
Oh, I
came to
love-
Norristown, you actually brought that with you. I think actually got it. Then Home Alone Hard was funny, and the coloring book for Die Hard. Then you also do like graphic design things for like huge movies or books or whatever, like the Miss Pettigrew thing. Is this drive, this work ethic to create so much, especially how young you are and the body of work you create up to this point, is that somewhat subconsciously due to the fact that you see how short life is with your sister, and this is your way of creating a legacy where your sister, outside of your parents and yourself, the legacy doesn't really, I mean, I'm sure you'll tell your kid about her, but there's not much there from a 12-year-old standpoint. Is there that need to leave something behind because you realize how short life is?
No, I've always liked making stuff. So I don't think my work ethic was influenced by that, but I think that I'm a relatively happy person because I think the biggest influence my sister's death had on me is that it made me a relatively happy person, because I know, any day when you're not sick or someone didn't just die, it's a good day and you should enjoy that. I think when you have a family tragedy, it recalibrates your idea of what a bad day is. So I think I am a happier
Good.
person. I've had a lot of comedians tell me that I'm unusually happy for a comedian. They're like,
Well, that's not a bad thing. I
what are
don't
you
think. I
smiling
mean,
about? I'm like, I don't.
this whole demeanor of like a comic, it gets old after a while. So no, I'm glad to hear that there's that. So I appreciate you being open and honest about that. I do appreciate that. My last question is, Doogie, what is the dream? What is, if there's one thing that you want to accomplish in your life when it comes to comedy, especially stand-up comedy, what is it that you would like to do? And what are you doing to progress to that goal?
You trying to make me feel bad? Jeez. I don't really have a goal.
Okay.
I
You're
just
very
like,
present, just trying to do your best day by day.
yeah, I just like doing stand up,
Good.
trying to get better, working on my jokes,
Good, man.
trying
Dude,
to
this was,
get better
oh,
at
sorry.
them.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
But you're right, having a goal. I mean, I go to a friend's house, they're like, oh, I turned my wall into a chalkboard wall, you know, and they're like,
Oh,
they
I'm not
write
on that
their,
page, but yeah.
or they've got like a big dry erase and they write down their like,
Yeah.
you know, goals and stuff. But I don't know. I think very small. I mean, right now my goals are, I got a new album I got to
Yeah.
do, so I'm working on those jokes, trying to get them good, and then I'm working on the Invisible Boy comic book,
Nice.
and then I'm like, those are two things, and they both
Very
take a lot of time. So I'm like, that's it. That's
Yeah.
what I got on my plate.
I appreciate talking to you. I appreciate you being open and honest and present on this interview and just being able to like answer my questions without being turned off. I know sometimes my questions are a little, you know, out there kind of thing. So I do appreciate agreeing to do this and the time that you took to do this. I really, really do.
No
You're
problem.
one of
My
the
pleasure.
your jokes are really intelligent, clever, unique, and just outright hilarious. So I'm glad that you're still doing it, man. And I can't wait to see you very soon
Thank you.
for that album. But I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. It meant a lot to me that you did this. I really do. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you real soon.
All right, I'll see you later.
All right, bye.